First of all, the scientific argument is a fraud. Carbon dioxide is not a poison. It's not destroying the planet. They have no intention of replacing the energy that we currently get from nuclear, coal, and fossil fuels. What Lyndon LaRouche said is the only way they're going to be able to carry this policy out is with fascist austerity measures, similar to what was done in Nazi Germany.
Hey friends, Sean here. Before we begin this powerful and very, very important critical update with Harley Schlanger, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, the Patriot Solar Bank. Look guys, with all the earthquakes in California and natural disasters around the world, it's real easy to understand why having your own power bank for your cell phone and other items is really important. You'll never have to waste money on batteries again because it's solar powered, and with a dual USB port you can charge up to 2 devices at once, and you can charge your phone obviously anywhere with this bad boy. It's lightweight and very durable, compact, and great for all emergencies. The device features include solar-powered recharging, dual USB ports, 8,000 mAh battery capacity, LED lamp illumination, USB cable, and detachable compass. The Patriot Solar Bank is a perfect gift, but there's a limited supply, so get yours today at a discount before they sell out. Use promo code SGT15 to save 15% off your order. Take advantage of it now and give your family the gift of power anywhere in the world. Just visit patriotsolarbank.com. I'll leave the link below this video. Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. It is wonderful to have you back, and thank you to everybody who has subscribed to my backup YouTube channel, SGT Report 2 on YouTube. As you guys know, I'm posting more videos, original videos there that can only be found there. So I'll put the link below this video. Please subscribe because YouTube is killing my main channel. The view counts, everything's falling off a cliff. That's okay. We're going to continue to tell the truth and speak truth because that's what we do. And that's why YouTube and Google are changing their algorithms to promote what they call more authoritative sources. Authoritative equals authoritarian. Guys, the world is upside down, and I've got Harley Schlanger on the line to help us figure it all out. Harley, welcome back.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
Good. How are you? The world is upside down. Do you see it as being such in your neck of the woods?
Oh, it's completely chaotic. And we just had this farce of a G7 meeting, which, here you have governments. The German government is collapsing. The French government is in trouble. There's no government in Italy. Boris Johnson is forced to beg the EU to give him some break on Brexit. Japan is breaking intelligence ties with South Korea. And as Trump said, he's coming to this meeting in the strongest shape of any leader in the world, and it was true. But what was done with the G7 was to throw up a lot of confetti and diversion. Well, I think the real story was what was unfolding in the Jackson Hole, Wyoming Federal Reserve retreat, where we saw an open push for a global banker's dictatorship.
Let's talk about that because I saw just 3 days ago on Zero Hedge, it was titled, here it is, an unprecedented, shocking proposal. The BOE's Mark Carney urges replacing dollar with Libra-like reserve currency. Harley, we are seeing signs now, like never before, that this entire global economic system is on the precipice of absolute destruction. And the behavior of these bankers is evidence that they're panicked. As we're having this conversation today, guys, on Tuesday, gold is at $1,542 per ounce USD. Silver is up another 50 cents at $18.15. Meanwhile, an article today on Zero Hedge, Harley, get this, Bill Dudley, shocker, ex-New York Fed president urges Fed's Powell to prevent Trump re-election. There's something going on with these bankers. They're panicked.
Well, they're panicked, but they're also fascists. I mean, what they're doing is moving for, when I say a banker's dictatorship, I'm not saying that as hyperbole. That's what it is. If you look at what Mark Carney said, he's the governor of the Bank of England. He said, what we need is a synthetic hegemonic currency. Why? Because monetary policy is not working. Well, of course it's not working. What they're doing is they're creating funny money and pumping it into the bubble. But his synthetic hegemonic currency has nothing to do with what some people think of as Bitcoin as an alternative to a collapsing dollar. What it has to do with is giving more power to the central banks to control fiscal policy. And this became clear in a second paper that came out recently by BlackRock people who had a whole bunch of former central bankers put together a report in which they called it a monetary regime change. And if you read the report, what it says is no constraints on central banks. Now, this is an outgrowth of modern monetary theory. And I'm not going to get too academic on this. I'll just let you know straightforward what it is. Modern monetary theory says you can create credit or debt as much as you want and have the government spend it without having inflation. However, if it does start to lead to inflation, you can stop it. And how do you know when to stop it? They say that a group of experts will run the monetary and fiscal policy. And I would ask you, are these the same experts who didn't see 2008 coming? The same experts who didn't see this bubble coming? They're not experts in anything except destroying nations, eliminating sovereignty, taking away democratic institutions, and establishing dictatorship. So you have these two swindles, Carney's synthetic hegemonic currency and BlackRock's monetary regime change of subordinating, what they say, subordinating fiscal policy to monetary policy. In other words, they can print as much money as they want, and they will then determine where it goes. They'll tell the governments where it should go. Now, where's it going to go? This is the third swindle, the Green Financial Initiative, which is run by the same people, comes out of the Bank of England also. Mark Carney is one of the promoters of this. And Bernie Sanders just proposed almost $17 trillion in spending to get rid of fossil fuels, nuclear, coal, and shift everything to wind and solar. Now, this is a boondoggle for the people who sell the bonds. They're going to set up all kinds of carbon trading, carbon bonds, and so on. They're going to make every corporation, before it can get a loan, apply for certification that what they're doing will not increase their carbon footprint. And what it means is they're going to do more rapid deindustrialization of this country. As you know, Sean, I've argued repeatedly that the financial crisis has to do with the shutdown of industry, of manufacturing, of science, of research and development. And instead, credit is available only for swindles and boondoggles, whether they're derivatives, whether they're futures contracts, whatever. And that's why we have a problem. We have debt that has grown out of control. And they're not addressing the debt problem at all. When they talk about fiscal matters, they're talking about more money to the bubble.
There's a lot to unpack there. You've got my brain spinning here. Let me just read what Carney said at the G7 in Jackson Hole. Perhaps the most stunning thing ever to be unveiled at Jackson Hole. Guys, people in America, the average citizen, Harley, doesn't know that this is happening. They're not paying attention. They're not being told by NBC, quote unquote, news. They're not being told by the Washington Post, Bezos blog. They're not being told that this is what's happening in Jackson Hole. A powerful banker, the Bank of England's Carney, is urging the replacement of the US dollar with a Libra-like reserve currency. Guys, that is a cryptocurrency. When they mention Libra, that's a crappy cryptocurrency. And it's a dramatic revamp of the global monetary, financial, and economic order. These guys want a new world order, a one world government, and a one world currency. I think that given all the conversations you and I have had over the years, Harley, you've hit the nail on the head once again, probably better than ever before, because not only are they moving to a new economic order, you mentioned their green initiatives. Let's talk about their initiatives. If they're going to do away with fossil fuels, $17 trillion in spending is probably not going to be enough to replace coal and gasoline and natural gas and everything we rely on to have a first world nation. But they don't want us to have a first world nation. Under UN Agenda 2030 policies, they want to drag us down to the third world, thereby making sure that no one is rich and everyone is equal, because we'll all be poor. We'll all be living in complete poverty. And guess what? Guys like Bill Gates, they trumpet this stuff in TED Talks.
I asked the top scientists in this several times, do we really have to get down to near zero? Can't we just, cut it in half or a quarter? And the answer is that until we get near to zero, the temperature will continue to rise.
Well, the point you're making is absolutely right. they have no intention of replacing the energy that we currently get from nuclear, coal, and fossil fuels. Their argument around, first of all, the scientific argument is a fraud. Carbon dioxide is not a poison. It's not destroying the planet. And the idea that somehow people eating meat, people driving cars, people flying in airplanes is causing the warming is complete crap. It's caused by events much bigger than that. The solar cycles, solar radiation, the upper changes in the upper atmosphere, and more importantly, our position in the solar system, our solar system's position in the galaxy. And these are things that real scientists are talking about. But people like McKibben, who's one of the leading experts, so-called, he's a journalist. He has no scientific background. Greta Thunberg is a poor kid with Asperger's syndrome who nearly died from anorexia, who's probably going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for organizing a brainwashing operation against children to get them to turn against their parents and report their parents. If you turn on your air conditioning in the summer, your children may report you to the new green police. So I'll just give you an example from Germany. We've had the nuclear exit in Germany. We're now having an exit from coal. They're trying to shut down fossil fuels. And what's the result? 2 of the last 4 quarters, German GDP grew at less than 0%. One more quarter and they'll have officially admit that we're in a recession. What's the target? They're destroying the auto sector and the machine tool sector. That's what made German economy one of the strongest in the world. So, we're seeing a commitment to destroying what we believe, what most of us believe is the birthright, a constitutional birthright to have progress, to be a part of a system that actually produces more so that you can take care of a growing population. Under their terms, we're going to have less produced, less food, and we're going to have waves of starvation, plague, new diseases, and probably a lot of wars.
Can we talk just a little bit about the climate science and climate change? And the reason I think we should is because they continue to shove it down our throats.
Yeah.
That climate change is real and that climate deniers ought to be thrown in jail. And I'm not just hearing that from the mainstream media. I'm hearing it from podcasters who are quite popular that I listen to because I like to keep my eye on the enemy. And I think it's fair to call Joe Rogan an enemy now of truth. Joe Rogan the other day brought up climate change. And he said it's incredible to him that people will still deny that climate change is real. Now, he said we can argue about what's causing it, but it's real. Climate change is real. Mark Maron says the exact same thing. These people are all on board with the climate change science. Meanwhile, as we're having this conversation today, the creator of global warming's infamous hockey stick chart loses climate science lawsuit. This extraordinary outcome is expected to trigger severe legal repercussions for Dr. Mann in the U.S. and may prove fatal to climate science claims that modern temperatures are quote-unquote unprecedented. I'm going to give away a bit about my age here, but I remember quite well the fear-mongering documentary from Al Gore telling us that sea levels were going to rise. And I think by the time we hit the year 2000, New York City would be underwater to some degree. These people just continue to lie and lie and lie. And their solution, Harley, is to pay carbon credits to the bankers. So somehow carbon credits on the carbon you exhale by breathing, by being a human on this planet, paying taxes to the bankers will fix the situation that they created. This is all Club of Rome stuff, as you well know, Harley.
Let me give you an example of what a scam this is. In Germany, starting in September, there's going to be a 10-cent per liter tax on every liter of gasoline that you purchase. Now, who does that hit the hardest? It hits farmers, it hits truckers, and it hits ordinary people who drive to work. Now, what the government said is that, well, if you're poor enough, we'll give you a tax credit to make up for that. But what they don't tell you is if you're poor enough, you don't pay taxes, so a tax credit is nothing. It's just a scam. Now, you mentioned Michael Mann. One of the reasons he lost the case is he refused to make the calculations available, which led to his production of the so-called hockey stick. This is one of the pivotal aspects of the climate change argument. that he was able to show that we're seeing rises in temperature and it's related to rises in CO2. There's no competent scientist has found that correlation. And what you find is that even the national organization that in the US that does weather reporting and temperatures, they're changing their figures, and they've been caught repeatedly that what they do is they start with the conclusion that there's warming, and then they feed that into their calculations to show that. But in the old days, we used to call this kind of hot weather summer. The idea that if it hits 100 degrees in New York, that's somehow the coming apocalypse. That's not exactly new. In fact, we had hotter weather in the 1950s in New York City than we've had this summer. So it is a fraud, but it's a self-feeding fraud. This goes back to the period in the 1960s when the United States had a robust economy, a vigorous economy based on the effect of the spending on the space program, which was generating $10 to $14 in private contracts for every dollar of government spending. We saw the advance of the steel industry, the machine tool sector, automobiles, everything. And we had a growing middle class. And this was a threat to the Club of Rome, which you mentioned. They got people like Paul Ehrlich to write books called The Population Bomb. Under Ehrlich's book, by the mid-1980s, we were going to be inundated with famine throughout the world because of the old Malthusian formulation that population grows geometrically and food supply arithmetically, which is completely wrong. The American farmer proved that's wrong. So every assumption that they put forward is proven to be false. But in the meantime, they've seized the upper hand in policymaking. And whether it's Bernie Sanders' $17 trillion or Ocasio-Cortez's, we have 12 years or 8 years or whatever the latest figure is to turn this around, they're apocalyptic lunatics. And the president, for all the credit he deserves for this, he's not going along with it. He's saying, let the scientists debate it. But as you point out, someone who says, let's debate this on a scientific ground is equated with someone who denies a Holocaust.
Right. And now these bankers are calling for interference in the next election to prevent this president from being reelected. There's nobody else on this planet standing for the people in this country, so of course they want him out. Look, I mentioned the Club of Rome, I mentioned Bill Gates' Agenda 2030 policies. Bill Gates, in his famous TED Talk, wants to reduce emissions to zero by 2050, if not sooner. And I need people to understand, when I mention the Club of Rome, I should also mention the Tavistock Institute. Let me play this soundbite from Ann Bessington, who breaks down the birth of these ideologies, of these ideas to rally humanity around certain crises that will give the establishment more control by keeping the rest of us scared to death. This is Ann Bessington. Listen to this.
In a document called The First Global Revolution, authored by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, on pages 104 and 105, it stated, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers, of course, will be caused by human intervention that will require a global response." That's the origin of global warming, ladies and gentlemen.
Problem, reaction, solution. Once again, the rich and powerful, the elite that control this world, are going to whipsaw humanity into the direction, like corralling us like cattle and taking us where they want us to go, Harley.
Well, Sean, the reference to Alexander King from her was very important because King is one of the people who worked closely with the Tavistock Institute. There was another figure named John Rawlings Rees who said, in order to get people to accept what's going to be necessary in the second part of the 20th century, we must deploy psychological shock troops to weed out those who don't go along with the scientific evidence. And, if you think about this discussion now of the red flag phenomena around gun owners and so on, you can see the fact that you're going to have psychological shock troops being deployed in the schools, in the neighborhoods, to take those people who are so-called deniers and re-educate them. So when, in 1971, when this thing started taking off, the Global 2000, the Club of Rome, Meadows and Forrester, and so on, and then Nixon took the dollar off gold on August 15th, 1971, what Lyndon LaRouche said is the only way they're going to be able to carry this policy out is with fascist austerity measures, similar to what was done in Nazi Germany. Now, that's what we're seeing, only instead of seeing people wearing swastikas and marching through the streets, they're taking over the universities. They've already taken over the universities, I should say. They're taking over our children's schools. This Fridays for Future with this poor character, Greta Thunberg, who's currently on a millionaire's yacht going across the Atlantic Ocean. She's coming here to try and grab young minds to get them to organize against their parents. This is exactly what was done by the Nazis when they took over the education system.
Right.
So we're seeing a repeat, but it's done on a so-called more sophisticated psychological level. But just to come back to the finances of it for a minute, you can see that one of the weaknesses they have is that for them to succeed, they have to convince the American people, you're living too well, you're eating too much steak, you're driving too much, you're keeping your house too cool in the summer and too warm in the winter. Now, this is being said to a population which has lost an enormous amount of security, economic security, since 2008. And a growing number of people are there with almost no savings, no health insurance. Obamacare has proven to be the fraud that we said it was at the beginning. And now they're being told that they're the cause, their consumption is the cause of global warming. Now, hopefully in the United States, the frontier spirit will take hold, because most Americans don't buy this. I mean, we even saw in France, where they'd been subjected to brainwashing, the yellow vest movement nearly overthrew the Macron government when he tried to use this as an excuse for austerity. Germany, it'll probably work because the Germans are so submissive and passive. But I really think it's important for everyone listening to us today to study these plans, look at these policies, these financial policies, look at things like negative interest rates. I mean, most people have no idea what that means. But it means if you put $1,000 into a savings account in a year, you may only have 970 or 950 or 940 left. They're stealing. It's outright theft and fraud. And we've got to take advantage of the fact that we have a president who may get disrupted from time to time, distracted, but essentially opposes these plans. And we've got to make sure he goes with the full plan, and not just attacking Powell over low interest rates. Powell has to be removed because he and the Federal Reserve are a criminal organization stealing from the American people and depriving us of a future.
All of this just strikes me as psychological warfare. It's being waged, psychological warfare is being waged against the American people and against people around the world. And when I listen to people like, again, Mark Maron, lament that this president, who he calls a fascist and an authoritarian, is in the White House, and I hear people like him lament that climate change, something needs to be done about climate change, and that he feels so hopeless because this president is in the White House. To me, that is, and I believe he believes it, but to me, that is a form of psychological warfare, because he won't tell you, he won't play the soundbite I just played from Ann Bessington. He won't tell you, maybe he doesn't know about the birth of these ideas, these New World Order globalist ideas to corral humanity in the direction they want to take us. It's an anti-human vision for the world. It's a boot stomping on humanity for the rest of eternity, Harley. And we can see it coming into fruition too with the social media giants. These guys, Google, Facebook, YouTube, they would love to implement the social credit scores system that we see being implemented in China. And, you know, we see these socialists in this country, these young people brainwashed, as you said, really, the universities have been taken over. These young people are all brainwashed by the universities to believe that communism is some panacea, when communism has killed more people on planet Earth than any other ideology ever, I think. It's psychological warfare, Harley.
Sean, they should come to where I live now in Potsdam, Germany, which is one of the centers of the East German communist regime. And people now are voting for the so-called Nationalist Party, the Alternative for Deutschland. There's an election this weekend in Brandenburg, which is the state that includes Potsdam, and also Saxony, which includes Leipzig and Dresden. And the party that's favored to win the most votes is the Alternative for Deutschland. Just as the Lega won the Italian elections, and if they have new elections in Italy, likely the Lega will be by far the largest vote getter. Salvini will get close to 40%. So the rebellion is continuing worldwide. But what's key to it is this idea of a nation, that a nation represents the interests of the whole population, as opposed to little bits and pieces of identity, whether your identity is determined sexually, tribally, ethnically, races rather, or religious. The idea of the identity politics is to lose this notion of a nation. And what Trump has been fighting for is to put forward the idea of a national policy that's in the interest of the American people. Now, what does the Federal Reserve do? What do the private banks do? Their interest is protecting the largest banks, protecting the corporate interests, not the nation. They could lower rates or raise rates. They don't care where the rates are as long as they're determining them, and they're determining them to make sure the flow of funds goes to their operations. So I think we really need to refocus a lot on this fight against the central bankers, because they're coming out and making themselves big fat targets by these kinds of scams they're running, and they're not getting covered. And I commend you for continuing your efforts, because this may be one of the few places where people will hear about this.
Yeah, well, I commend you as well. I mean, we're all in this mess together, and our only hope is truth. But the mainstream media and the big social media giants in Silicon Valley are literally aligned against truth. As we wrap up this conversation, Harley, I want to just share this with you. You might find it amusing or disgusting or both. I reported this on my backup channel with the video titled, "Heterosexuality is so 1985. When we talk about psychological warfare being waged against the population in this country around the world, Harley, we have to talk about the assault on cultural and Christian norms, and indeed on the sexes themselves. NBC News published what I can call literally an anti-human op-ed written by self-declared lesbian atheist Marcy Bianco, who despises heterosexuality and who believes that heterosexuality is the means of control by which women are oppressed. I'm not making this up. She wrote an article praising Miley Cyrus as being some sort of hero for essentially ruining her marriage with, I forget the actor's name, Liam Hemsworth, I believe is his name, and now he filed for divorce, as Miley is being celebrated by the mainstream media for making out with a Victoria's Secret model. And I guess lesbianism is the means by which women can take their power back, according to Marcy Bianco. You can't make this shit up, Harley. This is insanity. And it's what Tom DeLay warned us about several years ago in that Newsmax interview. There is an effort to fast-track, mainstream, and legalize 12 perversions. And I'm not even saying that being a lesbian is a perversion. What I'm saying is that pedophilia and bestiality are, and it's a slippery slope into those things being celebrated by TMZ as well.
Well, I saw that article on NBC, and I have to say that I wasn't surprised by it, but it's the fact that it's being openly promoted by one of what used to be one of the three networks that were available to people. You get a sense of we're not on a slippery slope anymore. We're halfway down to hell. And I think the connection between the brainwashing, the social brainwashing, the transformation of culture away from people having a sense of moral responsibility for the future into the idea that whatever gives you pleasure for the moment is what's important. And then the purveyors of pleasure who provide increasingly degenerate forms of entertainment that seduce people into this kind of self-degeneration. So it is brainwashing. It's mass brainwashing. And this was the program coming out of World War II of people like Alexander King, Bertrand Russell, the Huxley brothers, Aldous and Julian Huxley. They argued, Julian Huxley at the United Nations in, I think, 1948, that you can't support eugenics openly anymore because Hitler made it unacceptable. However, we can use conservation to the same effect. And so that takes us back right to the end of World War II, where they were openly espousing Nazi ideas covered up as so-called ecological necessity.
Yeah.
So we've come full circle to where these people are openly espousing what can legitimately be called satanic outlook when you're regarding the nature of human beings. And those of us who still are human beings have to fight it, and have to fight it effectively. And I would urge people to read these articles. I'm going to be writing about this whole economic swindle that's coming out now. And I really encourage people to contact me and get a copy of these articles.
Yeah, you can tell people how to contact you here in a second as we round out this conversation. I think you're absolutely right. It's satanic. It is anti-human. And, as I said in that video about Marcy's article, which appeared on NBC News on their website, she wrote, historically, women have been conditioned to believe that heterosexuality is natural or innate, just as they have been conditioned to believe that their main purpose is to make babies. And Harley, what I tried to remind Marcy of in my video is that she used the term historically. There would be no history if it weren't for men and women making babies. There would be no human beings. There would be nothing. This woman is absolutely out of her mind. These are insane beliefs, just as it's insane for the socialist communist party of young people in this country fighting for their Marxist ideologies and beliefs. They want to turn, evidently, Harley, they want to throw away the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and exchange it for the Karl Marx Communist Manifesto.
I think they're being stampeded by social pressure for the most part. And I think we can win the youth in the United States back, but it's going to take some real fighting and telling the truth about how they're being manipulated. They think they're standing up for their rights, and they're actually defending the policies of the most wealthy and degenerate people in the world.
Yeah. Those that don't understand history are condemned to repeat it, and we find ourselves on this hamster wheel. Humanity's been on the hamster wheel century after century after century, just I think from the beginning, Harley. And these people, these elite that run the whole world, they know the playbook, and they just keep victimizing us with the same damn playbook. Fortunately, I think people around the world are finally waking up, but you're right, it's an uphill battle, because if we lose the youth, it's game over. Harley, how can people contact you? I know sometimes you give out your email.
Yeah, I have an ongoing correspondence with a lot of your listeners and viewers. Just send me an email to harleysch@gmail.com, and I'll send you a link to my blog site so you can see the weekly articles I post on the topics we've been discussing today. So it's harleysch@gmail.com.
Very good, very good. And are you still the national spokesperson for LaRouche PAC?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm now in Western Europe, but I'm still the spokesperson for the United States.
Excellent. All right. Well, why don't you shout out that website too, because there's important information being posted, news articles being posted over there all the time as well.
Sure, LaRouchePAC.com. And by the way, a young associate of ours is going to announce a campaign against Senator Cory Booker in New Jersey, probably right after Labor Day. So people should stay tuned on LaRouchePAC.com to read about that.
Oh, great. Great. Okay. Well, you'll know because of these fixed polls from the mainstream media, Cory Booker and the rest of the Democratic presidential candidates all outpoll and have the ability to beat Donald Trump in an election tomorrow, according to the mainstream media, Harley. I'm just so amused by that. These people can't fill up a gym, a high school gym, and we're told that any one of them could beat Trump in 2020.
I think they're polling their newsrooms.
Yeah, their newsrooms and their Democratic call lists. All right, guys, our guest has been Harley Schlanger. Harley, thank you so much for your time.
I'll see you soon, Sean.
Yeah, talk to you soon. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. A shout out and a special thanks to my patrons who, the less than 1% of you who are a patron, thank you so much. You're keeping us in the game as YouTube demonetizes just about every video we put up and interview. So thank you so much. And guys, for real news 24/7, you can visit us, of course, at SGTreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and mockingbird mainstream media lies. God bless. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for liking. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
The Federal Reserve now is openly advocating treason against the United States by siding with the Chinese on trade policy.